Man, life in my neighborhood was the picture-perfect suburban dream, or at least that's what I thought. You know, white picket fences, manicured lawns, and neighbors who smile at you while secretly judging your trash cans. My place? I loved it. Big enough to have my little garden in the back, a driveway that could fit my car and maybe a small tank if I wanted, not that I do, yet, and a porch that caught the morning sun just right. It was mine. All mine. And I was proud of it. Before anything happened, the HOA and I had what I'd call a friendly but watchful relationship. They'd send newsletters, reminders about keeping your grass at exactly 2.5 inches, and, of course, the occasional friendly notice about trash cans or bird feeders. I never minded. I mean, rules are rules, right? And honestly, I liked knowing someone was keeping an eye on the neighborhood. It made me feel safe. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself when I got those passive-aggressive letters about my garden gnomes. You see, in my mind, life was simple. I take care of my home, they take care of theirs, we all wave politely at the street corner, and everyone lives happily ever after. The occasional HOA newsletter was just part of the background music of suburban life. My little garden thrived, my driveway sparkled, and I even had a bird feeder that attracted more squirrels than birds. I like to think of it as a squirrel amusement park, free admission, all the snacks you could eat. But here's the thing about HOAs, they love rules. And not just any rules. The kind of rules that make you wonder if they secretly enjoy power trips. I had noticed little things over time. They cared about the tiniest details, like the exact angle of your welcome mat, or whether your mailbox slightly leaned to the left. At first, it seemed funny. I mean, who actually checks if a mailbox is leaning? Apparently, they do. And they do it with an enthusiasm I'd never seen outside of professional squirrels. Still, I was careful. I mowed my lawn, trimmed my hedges, and smiled when the HOA president drove by. I figured, as long as I followed the letter of the law and maybe a few unspoken rules about smiling politely, I was safe. Life was calm, predictable, almost boring, if I'm being honest. And that was just how I liked it. But here's the kicker, even in a perfect suburban life, there's always a little tension simmering beneath the surface. I started noticing things. Random people peeking over fences, overly cheerful neighbors asking oddly personal questions, and once or maybe it was twice a mysterious white van that seemed to linger near my driveway. I shrugged it off. Paranoia doesn't look good on anyone, and I like to think of myself as a rational adult. Still, I couldn't shake it. There was something about the way the HOA handled security that felt intense. Their newsletters weren't just reminders, they were like little love letters to control. Remember, your neighbor might be watching, one line read. Another, keep your yard compliant for your safety and ours. Safety? Sure, but there was something more to it. Something subtle, like they wanted to know everything. So I started paying attention. Little things. When the HOA came by, I noticed how they looked around not just at my lawn, but at my garage, my garden tools, my bird feeder. And me. Always me. Like I was a character in some suburban spy movie, except I hadn't signed up for it and I was pretty sure the squirrels weren't agents. At that point, life in the perfect suburban neighborhood started feeling a little less perfect. But honestly, I was still enjoying it. I watered my plants, trimmed the hedges, laughed at my squirrel circus, and smiled at the neighbors. The HOA was a part of the background noise, like the faint hum of a fridge you don't really notice until it stops working. Little did I know, that hum was about to get a lot louder. And it wasn't going to be about grass height or mailbox angles anymore. But hey, at the time, I was just living my life, proud of my home, proud of my garden, and blissfully unaware that the very people I trusted to keep the neighborhood safe were about to turn my world upside down. And honestly, that's where the story begins. Not with anger, not with confrontation, but with peace. With calm. With a perfect little life and a perfectly suburban nightmare waiting to unfold. It started with a feeling, one of those little gut nudges you try to ignore because, honestly, life is easier when you pretend everything is normal. I was in the backyard, sipping my morning coffee, checking on the garden. The squirrels were already busy, as usual, when I noticed it. A tiny glint on the fence. Just a spark, really, catching the sunlight at that perfect, annoying angle that makes you go, huh? I squinted. Tilted my head. Took another sip of coffee. The glint was gone. Probably the sun. Probably my imagination. Or maybe a squirrel doing some sort of Olympic gymnastics. I wanted to laugh it off, because paranoia makes everyone look a little crazy, and I was trying really hard not to be that guy. But then came the noise. A faint buzzing. Nothing crazy loud, just enough to make you pause mid-sip and think, wait, what is that? I froze. The coffee halfway to my lips. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. And there it was again, like a distant bee trapped in a jar, persistent, unnatural. Did I imagine it? I muttered to myself. I waved my hand around, maybe trying to shoo it away, like that would solve anything. My brain, as rational as it likes to think it is, started running through explanations. Maybe it was the neighbor's new fancy security system. They were always up to something: cameras, motion sensors, floodlights. Those types of things, you know? I told myself, probably a new gadget. Nothing to worry about. But then came the glint again. Only this time, I noticed it moved, or maybe I moved, I can't even remember. I crouched slightly, tried tilting my head like a curious cat. The sun caught it again. A tiny reflection. A lens. And for a split second, my stomach did that weird drop thing it does when you realize you're being watched. I tried to shrug it off. Maybe it was a solar garden light I didn't notice before. Could be one of those decorative crystals I hung last month, maybe it reflected in a funny way when the sun hits it just right. That sounded plausible. Safe. Rational. Calm. I liked calm. I held on to it. But the buzzing wouldn't stop. It was soft, mechanical, precise, like something running on a timer or a motor. Not natural. Not the wind. Not squirrels, as skilled as mine are, they're not that precise. And that's when I realized something important: I didn't feel safe anymore. Not really. And that gut feeling, that little warning bell you try to silence, was screaming at me. So, I did what any reasonable person would do: I started looking around. Slowly, casually, like I wasn't about to turn my backyard into a CSI scene. I walked the perimeter, glanced over the fence at the neighbor's yard, checked the shrubs near the corners of my property. Nothing. No lights. No weird gadgets I could see. Just the usual suburban calm, and that faint buzzing. I imagined all kinds of scenarios, all absurd. Maybe a drone? But who flies drones at 7:30 a.m.? Maybe a bug. Maybe it was nothing. Rationalization, my old friend, kicked in. I told myself, you're being silly. Just a reflection. Just a sound. You're fine. But then, just for a second, my mind refused to lie. I caught the glint again, and this time I saw the shape. A small, round lens, perfectly still, hidden cleverly behind the fence slats. It didn't belong there. I didn't put it there. Nobody had mentioned it. And suddenly, all those little oddities, the intense HOA newsletters, the subtle friendly reminders, the occasional hovering of the neighborhood watch types, made sense. Maybe, just maybe, someone was watching me. I stepped back, careful not to make a scene. Coffee in hand, heart beating a little faster, I scanned my yard, trying to spot any other suspicious objects. I felt like I'd stumbled into a spy movie, except I was unprepared, in my pajamas, and all I had to defend myself was, well, nothing. Just my wits and a very defensive garden gnome. And that's when it hit me: life in my perfect suburban bubble wasn't so perfect anymore. That tiny lens, that faint buzz, it wasn't just a random glitch in my morning routine, it was the beginning of a story I didn't want to be part of. But here I was. And there was no going back. I finished my coffee, trying to act casual, but my mind was spinning. I knew I had to keep calm. Rational. Collected. But curiosity was already winning. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that my peaceful little backyard had just been turned into someone else's observation deck. Little did I know, this was only the first chapter of the HOA's secret little adventures. And trust me, it was about to get a lot stranger. Okay, so remember that weird buzzing and the mysterious glint I told you about? Yeah, turns out I wasn't crazy. It all started on a Saturday morning, the kind of morning that makes you believe the world's still a good place. The sun was soft, the coffee was strong, and my only plan for the day was to trim the hedges and maybe argue with myself about whether mowing counts as exercise. Everything was calm. Peaceful. Until I decided to follow my curiosity, or maybe my paranoia. Hard to tell at this point. That buzzing I'd been hearing the past few days? It was back. Fainter this time, but still there. Like an itch I couldn't scratch. So, I decided, that's it, I'm finding this thing. I grabbed my gloves, went out back, and started inspecting every inch of the fence like some suburban detective. It was ridiculous. I crouched. I peeked under bushes. I even got on my hands and knees at one point, which must have looked insane if any neighbors were watching. But honestly, I didn't care. I needed to know. And then, there it was. At first, I almost missed it. Tucked under a low bush near the fence line, half covered in leaves and dirt, was this tiny black object. Round. Smooth. With a faint blinking light, almost invisible in the sunlight. For a second, my brain didn't process it. I thought, maybe it's some kid's toy, or a sensor, or a random tech gadget that fell off a drone. But then I brushed off the dirt and saw it clearly, the lens. The wire. The small, discreet label on the back, property of HOA security. My stomach dropped. I just stood there, frozen. That tiny piece of plastic and metal suddenly felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. It wasn't just a gadget, it was a silent witness. A spy. Watching me. I looked around my yard, my garden, my chair, my grill, every corner of my personal space that suddenly didn't feel personal anymore. My first thought was, no way. No way they actually did this. My second thought was, less polite. You ever get that feeling when you realize your privacy's been invaded? Like your skin crawls, your brain goes full alert, and you start replaying every single moment you've ever spent in that space? That was me. Standing there, holding this tiny camera, thinking about how many mornings I'd walked out here in my pajamas. How many times I'd danced to music while watering the plants. How many private conversations I'd had, thinking no one was listening. And now I had proof someone was watching. Cinematic moment, imagine this, the camera zooms in on my face. Shock. Then confusion. Then that slow-burning anger that starts in your chest and works its way up until you can practically hear your heartbeat in your ears. I remember whispering out loud, "You've got to be kidding me." Then louder, "Seriously?" I probably scared a few squirrels, but at that point, I was past caring. I turned the little device around in my hand, studying it like it might bite. There was a tiny lens, a wireless transmitter, and a little tag with a serial number. It wasn't some cheap Amazon gadget either. This was professionally installed. Someone put this here, intentionally. Someone wanted to see what was happening in my yard. And that's when the real anger hit. Because here's the thing, this wasn't just about a camera. It was about control. About someone deciding they had the right to invade my space, to watch me without my knowledge or consent. Imagine waking up and realizing someone's been watching you, your every move, your morning routines, your life. It's not just creepy. It's violating. I took a step back, heart racing, scanning my yard like there might be more. I started imagining hidden microphones, motion sensors, drones disguised as dragonflies. My brain was spiraling. But I forced myself to breathe. One thing at a time. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and started filming everything. The camera under the bush, the fence line, the little blinking light, all of it. If they thought they could spy on me quietly, they had another thing coming. The cinematic scene in my head was wild, the camera zooms on my hands holding the device, the background blurs, heartbeat sound effect building in the distance. The moment felt unreal. Like I'd stepped straight into a thriller, except the villain wasn't some stranger. It was my HOA. Standing there, I realized something else too. I wasn't just angry. I was disappointed. I'd trusted them. I'd followed their rules, trimmed my hedges, kept my lawn perfect. And this was my reward, being treated like a suspect in my own home. So, I took the camera inside, set it on my kitchen counter, and just stared at it for a while. This tiny thing had changed everything. My peace. My privacy. My trust. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. Because if they thought they could hide a camera on my property without me finding out, they clearly didn't know who they were dealing with. So there I was, standing in my kitchen, staring down this little black camera like it had personally offended me. And honestly, it had. I felt like I'd just caught someone sneaking into my house and leaving footprints on my soul. I kept asking myself, why? Who? How long has this thing been here? My mind was spinning in circles. Every answer led to 10 new questions, and every question made me angrier. I decided I wasn't just going to sit around and feel violated, I was going full detective mode. First step, figure out what exactly I was holding. I grabbed a towel, because fingerprints, obviously, sat down at my kitchen table, and took a closer look. The label on the back had a model number, something like Secure 3000 Wi-Fi. It sounded fancy enough to be expensive and invasive. So I did what any normal person would do, I Googled it. Turns out, this wasn't some backyard toy. Nope. It was a high-end outdoor surveillance camera, often used by security companies and, according to one forum post, some HOAs. The kicker? It had remote viewing capabilities. Meaning someone, somewhere, could literally be watching live footage from my backyard. My jaw dropped. Now, I'm not a paranoid person, but in that moment, I swear I could feel my skin crawl. I looked out the window like I might catch someone mid-watch, sipping coffee, and taking notes on whether I watered the tomatoes too late in the day. Then the real fear hit. How long has this been going on? Weeks? Months? Longer? I couldn't stop picturing all the times I'd been outside, barefoot, half awake, muttering to myself about weeds. The thought that someone had possibly recorded that was beyond creepy. I started spiraling a bit. What else do they have cameras on? My driveway? The garden? My porch? That's when I realized I needed help. Real help. So, I called my buddy, Dave. He's a tech guy, the kind of person who takes apart gadgets for fun and somehow puts them back together with improvements. I told him what I found. There was a pause on the other end, then a low whistle. Man, he said, that's not just any camera. That thing's got encrypted streaming. Someone's paying for a monitoring service. Monitoring service? I repeated. Yeah, he said. You don't just buy those for fun. They link to an account. Whoever set it up can see everything from their phone. That hit me like a ton of bricks. So, I asked him to come over. Within the hour, Dave was in my kitchen, hunched over the camera with a screwdriver and that look tech guys get when they find a mystery to solve. He cracked it open, plugged it into his laptop, and started poking around. A few minutes later, he looked up at me with wide eyes. Dude, he said. You're not gonna like this. He turned the screen toward me, and there it was, a system ID registered to something called HOA Community Safety Hub. My jaw clenched. My so-called safety hub was apparently streaming footage from my backyard. That's when my frustration boiled over into full-blown disbelief. This wasn't just invasion, this was organized. Coordinated. They had a system. I asked Dave if he could tell how long it had been active. He scrolled for a bit, then pointed at a timestamp in the data log. Looks like about 6 weeks. 6 weeks. That meant for more than a month, someone had been silently recording my backyard, my property, without a single word to me. My chest tightened. My thoughts were racing faster than I could keep up. What else are they hiding? If they installed this one, who's to say they didn't put cameras in other members' yards too? Or microphones? Were they tracking cars? Watching people's front doors? The thought made my stomach twist. I felt that same hum of paranoia I tried to ignore earlier, only this time it wasn't paranoia, it was reality. The HOA had gone from community management to Big Brother with a clipboard. Dave leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You should talk to a lawyer," he said. "This isn't legal. Not by a long shot." He was right. But before I went all legal on them, I wanted answers straight from the source. I needed to hear them say it. I needed to know why. Because if they thought this was about security, I was about to show them what real accountability looks like. That night, I barely slept. Every shadow outside my window looked suspicious. Every car that slowed down made my heart jump. I kept glancing at the fence line, half expecting to see another blinking light. And for the first time since moving into the neighborhood, I didn't feel at home. I felt watched. Controlled. But deep down, beneath the frustration and paranoia, something else was building: determination. If the HOA wanted to play spy games, I was ready to flip the script. Because if they had secrets, I was going to dig them up one by one. Alright, so now that I had actual proof of the camera on my property, I thought, okay, this is it. Time to confront the HOA. Calmly. Rationally. Politely. I started with emails. Because, that's the civilized approach. I typed out a polite note, careful not to sound like I was about to explode, even though inside, I totally was. Something like, "Hello, I recently discovered a security camera installed on my property without my consent. Can you please clarify why it was placed there?" Send. Done. Then came the waiting. And the tension. And the little voice in my head saying, maybe they'll be reasonable, maybe. A few hours later, I got a response. One line. One line. "It's for your safety. No further information will be provided." I stared at the screen. Blinked. Stared again. My coffee went cold. "Right," I muttered. "That's totally helpful." So I tried the phone. Dialed the HOA office number like 10 times over the course of an afternoon. Every call went the same way. Friendly receptionist. Then a transfer. Then a voicemail. Then nothing. And on the rare occasion someone picked up, it was the classic: "You must be misunderstanding. It's standard procedure. Nothing to worry about." Ah, yes. Standard procedure apparently that includes secretly monitoring your homeowners while they water their plants in pajamas. Got it. By the third call, I started to feel that rising tension you see in movies right before something explodes. The kind of tension where the camera pans across the protagonist's desk, slow zooms on the mess of documents, emails open in multiple tabs, sticky notes everywhere. Yeah, my kitchen counter looked like that. My laptop had a dozen tabs open: HOA regulations, online forums, legal articles, and my phone screen was filled with unread messages I typed to the board but never sent in frustration. Cue cinematic montage. Hand flipping through the HOA's thick rulebook. Scrolling emails over and over, hoping for clarity. Fingers hovering over the phone keypad, dialing, hanging up, dialing again. Coffee cup trembling in my hand because tension. Every response I got was either vague, dismissive, or completely condescending. "It's for your safety. You don't understand how this system works. We've sent notices before." Notices? Notices about what? The camera? Because last I checked, my mailbox didn't have any blinking tech announcing, "Hey, by the way, you're being watched." By the end of the day, I felt a mix of frustration, disbelief, and a little paranoia. I paced my living room like some suburban vigilante, imagining hidden cameras in every bush. My garden gnome even got a suspicious side eye. I swear he was judging me. I realized something important in that moment: the HOA wasn't going to just come clean. Not politely. Not after being caught red-handed. The whole "it's for your safety" act was their shield. And behind that shield? Who knew what else they were hiding? I slumped into my chair, staring at the camera I had recovered from under the bush. Little blinking light, tiny lens, my silent witness to all their games. I thought about how easy it would have been for them to just ask. A note, a warning, a permission form, anything. But no. They opted for secrecy. For control. For something. That's when I realized if I wanted answers, I wasn't going to get them through polite emails or polite phone calls. I had to step it up. Ask the hard questions. Push back. And maybe, just maybe, shake the entire HOA tree until every hidden branch came crashing down. But for now, all I could do was sit there, staring at the blinking lens, plotting my next move. The confrontation hadn't gone as planned. Not even close. And that's when it hit me, this was going to take more than words. This was going to take strategy. The first round was over. And I wasn't losing. You know, I thought finding that camera would be the hardest part. Turns out, living after finding it was worse. Something in me shifted. Before, I used to walk into my backyard like it was my own little sanctuary, fresh air, birds chirping, my garden looking all proud and green. But now? Every time I stepped outside, I couldn't shake that crawling feeling like eyes were on me. Even when I knew I'd pulled the camera out, the paranoia stuck around like a bad echo. It's weird how fast your brain rewires itself when your trust gets broken. I started noticing everything. Every sound. Every flicker of light. A reflection on the fence? My heart jumped. A breeze in the bushes? Instant side eye. My morning coffee routine turned into a security sweep. I'd walk the perimeter like a soldier, checking behind planters, under the deck, even in the birdhouse. My neighbors probably thought I'd lost it. One morning, I caught myself whispering, "We're clear," like I was part of some covert operation. That's when I realized, this was really getting to me. And it wasn't just paranoia, it was anger. Deep, hot, unfair anger. Because this was my home. My safe place. And they'd tainted it. They didn't just invade my yard, they invaded my sense of safety. I started losing sleep. I'd lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there were more cameras I hadn't found. I'd scroll online until 2 a.m., reading HOA laws, privacy acts, case studies, like some kind of legal detective who never passed the bar. Every article made me more frustrated, because it all boiled down to the same thing: they had no right. And yet, there they were, acting like it was perfectly normal. It's for your safety, they said. Yeah, my safety. Right. Tell that to my blood pressure. Even the smallest things started to feel different. I'd walk to the mailbox and feel my shoulders tense. I'd see the HOA truck drive by and my pulse would spike. My home, the place that used to be my calm, had turned into a stage. And I didn't ask to be the main character in their little surveillance drama. Then came the neighbors. Word travels fast in a community like ours. One day I'm quietly investigating a hidden camera, and the next, everyone's whispering like it's a reality show. A few neighbors reached out, kindly. "Hey, I heard what happened, that's not okay." One guy even told me he'd started checking his own fence line just in case. But not everyone was brave. Some people didn't even make eye contact anymore. It's like they were afraid to be associated with me, the troublemaker. The one who dared to question the almighty HOA. And honestly, that hurt. Because I wasn't trying to start drama. I wasn't trying to rebel. I just wanted to feel safe in my own space. My family took it hard too. My partner kept saying, "What if they've been listening too?" And I didn't even know what to say. We started closing the blinds more. Moving conversations indoors. Turning up the TV when we talked about anything personal, which, let's be real, made us feel even more paranoid. That's when the reality really hit me: privacy isn't just about space, it's about peace. And when someone steals that peace, you start losing pieces of yourself too. There were moments when I just sat on the couch, thinking, how did it get to this? We bought into this neighborhood for safety, for order, for peace of mind. But the more secure they made it, the less human it felt. Cinematic moment, picture this: late night, lights low, soft hum of the fridge. I'm sitting alone, camera on the counter, staring at it. Voiceover. They didn't just put a camera in my yard. They put doubt in my mind. Fear in my mornings. Silence in my nights. They didn't invade my space, they invaded my peace. And right there, I decided, no more quiet compliance. No more hoping they'd do the right thing. If they wanted to turn the neighborhood into a surveillance zone, I was going to expose it: every wire, every policy, every person behind it. Because the truth was bigger than one hidden camera. This was about control. And I wasn't the only one being controlled. I took a deep breath, looked out my window, and whispered to myself. They wanted safety. I want freedom. And I knew right then, the fight was just getting started. After days of frustration, anxiety, and about 6 cups of too strong coffee, I decided it was time to stop feeling like a victim and start acting like a detective. If the HOA wanted to play sneaky, I was going to play smart. I told myself, no more guessing. No more assumptions. From now on, everything gets documented. So I grabbed my phone, turned on video mode, and started filming my yard like I was shooting a true crime documentary. I recorded every detail: the spot where I found the camera, the little scrape marks in the dirt where it had been wedged under the bush, even the faint indentation in the soil that matched the tripod mount. I got wide shots, close-ups, slow pans. I even narrated it like a TV host. This is the exact location where the camera was discovered, right here along the east fence line of my property. You can see the blinking light still faintly visible. It felt ridiculous at first, talking to my phone like that. But after everything they'd pulled, I knew one thing for sure: I needed proof before making any bold moves. Then I started collecting timestamps. I pulled up the photos and videos from my garden camera, the one I actually installed myself, thank you very much, and scrolled through the dates. Nothing stood out right away until I noticed a weird shadow pattern near the fence about a month back. At first, I thought it was just sunlight through the trees. But when I zoomed in, it looked suspiciously like someone crouching. I froze. Could that have been the moment they installed it? My pulse quickened. The figure was small, blurred, wearing a hat. You couldn't see a face, but the outline was there. That one frame suddenly became the smoking gun in my investigation. So, I took screenshots. Marked timestamps. Saved copies to a USB drive and an external hard drive, because if movies have taught me anything, it's that evidence always mysteriously disappears when you only keep one copy. Next, I started digging through the HOA's rules and bylaws again. I read every boring paragraph about community standards, security initiatives, and resident compliance. Nothing in there said they could install surveillance on private property. In fact, a few sections hinted that it was explicitly forbidden. That's when I realized, not only was this wrong morally, it was probably illegal. Still, I wanted a second opinion. So, I called up a local attorney who specialized in homeowner rights. We'll call him Mr. Daniels. I explained everything, from the buzzing sound to the HOA's dismissive emails. There was a long pause, then he said, "You're not crazy. What they did sounds like a violation of your right to privacy. Especially if the camera was physically on your property line." Hearing that from a professional felt like validation. Like, finally, someone saw what I was seeing. He told me to keep documenting everything: photos, videos, copies of all correspondence, and not to alert the HOA just yet. "Let them think you've dropped it," he said. "The more they underestimate you, the better." That advice stuck with me. So I played it cool. I smiled at the neighbors. I waved at the HOA patrol car when it passed by. But behind the scenes, I was building a digital fortress. Folders labeled Evidence A, Camera Discovery, HOA Communications. It was part detective work, part therapy. Every screenshot and timestamp felt like taking my power back. And then there was Dave, my tech-savvy friend. He came back over with some updated gear, and we ran a few scans for hidden wireless signals. At one point, we picked up a faint frequency still active near the fence line. Dave frowned. "That could mean there's another one," he said. "Another camera?" I felt my heart drop, but also my determination rise. If they'd planted one, what's stopping them from planting two? We kept scanning, moving systematically across the yard like a couple of off-brand FBI agents. No more cameras turned up that night, but that lingering signal? It was enough to keep me on edge. Cinematic moment, quick cuts of my investigation, phone camera flashing, laptop open with signal graphs, a notebook filled with scribbles and times, my reflection in the kitchen window as I record another piece of evidence. Voiceover. I knew I needed proof before making any bold moves. Because when you take on power, especially the kind that hides behind neighborhood smiles and bylaws, you only get one shot to expose the truth. By the end of the week, I had a solid case. Photos. Video. Legal advice. Even a hint that more was happening beneath the surface. But I still couldn't shake that feeling that this camera wasn't just some mistake. It was part of something bigger. A system. Maybe even a pattern. The HOA wanted control. But they'd underestimated one thing: how far I was willing to go once they crossed the line. And now, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. Because the next time I confronted them, I wouldn't be asking for answers. I'd be demanding them. After collecting all that evidence, I realized something: I couldn't be the only one noticing weird stuff around here. Cameras don't just magically appear on one property and stop there. If my privacy had been violated, maybe someone else's had too. So, one evening, I grabbed a thermos of coffee, walked out to the sidewalk, and started making friendly small talk with the neighbors. You know, the kind that starts innocent and somehow ends in conspiracy theories. First stop, Mrs. Jenkins, 3 houses down. Sweet lady, always trimming her roses like she's training for the neighborhood flower Olympics. I asked if she'd noticed any new cameras around lately. She laughed, waved her hand, and said, "Oh honey, the HOA's been putting up new security features for months now. I think it's good. Keeps the riffraff out." I smiled politely, but in my head, I was like, "Ma'am, the only riffraff here is whoever's watching us through those lenses." Then she said something that stuck with me. "They put one near my mailbox last month." I didn't question it, they said it was for package theft. That sounded harmless enough, until you realize near the mailbox also means pointed directly at her front door. I thanked her and moved on, feeling that familiar pit in my stomach. Next, I caught Tom, my next-door neighbor, retired military, very serious about his lawn and his morning routines. I figured if anyone noticed something, it'd be him. So I asked, "Hey, you ever get the feeling someone's watching our houses lately?" He paused mid-sip of his iced tea, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You too?" That's when my curiosity turned into full-blown suspicion. Tom told me he'd seen a white HOA utility truck parked on our street late one night, engine off, lights dimmed. When he walked toward it, it suddenly drove off. No logos, no explanation. He thought it was weird but didn't think much of it until he found a small black device near his backyard gate a week later. It wasn't a camera, but it looked like part of a disconnected module, maybe wireless. We compared notes, standing in his driveway like detectives in a suburban spy movie. But then came the real curveball: a neighbor who didn't agree with us at all. Across the street, Linda, who was basically the unofficial spokesperson for the HOA, overheard our conversation and decided to join in. "You guys are overreacting," she said with a tight smile. "The HOA is just trying to protect the neighborhood. You should be grateful they care enough to monitor for safety." "Monitor?" I repeated. "On private property?" She shrugged. "Sometimes the lines blur. If you're not doing anything wrong, you've got nothing to hide." Ah yes, the classic nothing to hide defense, right up there with trust the process and we're all in this together. Tom just looked at me and muttered, "That's exactly what they said back in training." At that point, I realized something deeper: the neighborhood wasn't united. It was divided right down the middle. Half of us valued privacy and freedom, and the other half worshipped at the altar of security. That night, I hosted a little impromptu coffee chat in my garage, which was really just code for suburban resistance meeting. A handful of neighbors came by, curious and nervous. Some shared stories about weird interference on their Wi-Fi or unexplained HOA workers on their lawns. Others insisted everything was fine, that we were being dramatic. I could see it in their faces: confusion, fear, denial. Nobody knew who to trust. At one point, Mrs. Jenkins's husband leaned in and whispered, "They installed one near the community pool too, but no one's supposed to know." I froze. Why would they hide that? The more people talked, the more the pattern came together: cameras near mailboxes, playgrounds, shared fences. Always justified by safety, but never with written approval. It was starting to sound less like neighborhood watch and more like neighborhood surveillance. Later that night, I sat on my porch with a cup of cold coffee, just thinking. The hum of the streetlights, the faint chirp of crickets, everything felt off. Every sound made me wonder if it was being recorded. Voiceover moment, cinematic close-up on my face under the porch light. They said it was about safety. But safety for who? Because it sure didn't feel like it was for us. I thought back to Linda's comment, "If you've got nothing to hide," that phrase echoed in my head. It's always the people in control who say that right before they start crossing lines. The next morning, I woke up to find a new HOA newsletter in my mailbox. Big bold letters on the front: "New security measures for community protection." And right underneath, a picture of one of the cameras. My camera. The same model. The same design. Only now, they were claiming it as part of an approved safety project. That's when it hit me: this wasn't just a mistake or one rogue board member. This was policy. Planned. Authorized. And they were trying to normalize it before anyone asked questions. The neighborhood wasn't just divided anymore. It was being conditioned. And I realized, the more people accepted it, the harder it would be to fight. By this point, I'd had enough of playing nice. I had evidence, legal advice, and a drive full of photos, timestamps, and video clips that could make even the most confident board member sweat. So when the HOA sent out their monthly notice about an upcoming board meeting, I circled the date like it was Judgment Day. I showed up early. Real early. Everyone else rolled in carrying Starbucks cups and clipboards. I walked in with a binder labeled "Evidence" in all caps. You could feel the energy shift. The meeting started like any other: dull updates about landscaping budgets, parking violations, and community harmony. Then came the open floor session. My moment. I stood up, took a breath, and said, "I need to address a serious privacy violation involving surveillance equipment found on my property." That got everyone's attention. You could practically hear the air conditioner working overtime. The HOA president, a man who somehow always wore polo shirts in pastel colors, cleared his throat and said, "Let's remember to keep things civil and respectful." What exactly are you referring to? I flipped open my binder like I was about to cross-examine a witness. This. I slid a printed photo across the table, a close-up of the camera, the one I'd found buried under the bush near my fence line. He glanced at it, frowned, then looked at the vice president. "Is this one of ours?" She hesitated just long enough to give herself away. "I'm not sure. We've installed some new devices for community safety, but they're only in common areas." I raised an eyebrow. Common areas? My backyard is not a common area. A couple of residents in the audience whispered to each other. Someone coughed awkwardly. I continued, keeping my tone calm but firm. This device was found inside my property line. And according to a tech expert, it was active, transmitting a signal. The treasurer jumped in. "Well, maybe it was a contractor error. We can't monitor every installation." I cut him off. "Then you're admitting it was an HOA installation?" Silence. Beautiful, uncomfortable silence. That's when the president tried the classic move, the calm, patronizing tone. "Look, we understand your concern, but our intention is to maintain neighborhood safety. You'd be surprised how many people appreciate having these measures in place. Safety doesn't mean surveillance, I shot back. And you don't get to redefine privacy because it's convenient. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a violation. His jaw tightened. I could see it, that subtle mix of annoyance and panic. He wasn't used to being challenged. I laid out the rest of my evidence, photos, timestamps, even the blurry frame of the person installing it. I quoted specific sections from the HOA's own bylaws: no installation of monitoring or recording devices shall occur on private property without homeowner consent. Then I added, I've already consulted legal counsel, and if this isn't addressed properly, we'll be taking it further. You could have heard a pin drop. The secretary, who hadn't said a word all meeting, suddenly piped up. Maybe we should table this for private discussion. Translation: let's get this out of the record before it blows up. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. With respect, no. This needs to be on record. You invaded my privacy, and likely others. The community deserves to know exactly what's happening and who authorized it. A few people in the room started nodding. Even Tom, my next-door neighbor, gave me that silent get-em look from the back row. The president tried one last time to deflect. We'll investigate and get back to you in writing. I leaned forward. That's what you said the first time. And you didn't. So let's make it simple: was this camera installed with HOA approval or not? His face flushed. He looked down at the agenda papers like the answer might be hiding in there. Finally, he muttered, "Meeting adjourned." And just like that, gavel down, everyone scattering, pretending not to make eye contact. I gathered my binder, gave a polite smile, and said loud enough for the room to hear, "For the record, I'll be expecting a written response within 10 business days." A few people actually clapped as I walked out. Not a lot, but enough. Outside, the cool night air hit my face like a reset button. My hands were still shaking, but it wasn't fear anymore, it was adrenaline. Power. Voiceover moment, soft, reflective tone. They wanted me to feel small. To feel like I didn't have a say. But once you start standing up for your rights, something shifts. You stop asking for permission, and you start demanding accountability. I looked back at the community center lights fading behind me. They thought that gavel meant the conversation was over. But for me? That's when it really started. After that board meeting disaster, I walked out with one thought running through my head: if they won't fix it quietly, I'll make some noise. They'd brushed me off once. Tried to shut me down twice. But now? I had a binder full of evidence, a lawyer on my side, and a growing list of neighbors who were starting to realize this wasn't paranoia, it was a pattern. So I got strategic. Step 1: Paper trail. I sat at my kitchen table, late into the night, typing up a formal cease and desist letter, yeah, the legal kind. I copied Mr. Daniels' suggested format word for word, adding my own flavor. Any further unauthorized surveillance on my property will be treated as trespassing and reported to local authorities. I printed 5 copies. One went to the HOA president. One to their legal counsel. One to the management company. One to my lawyer. And the last one taped right on my front door. A not so subtle message: I know my rights, and I'm not backing down. Next came digital backup. I uploaded everything: the videos, timestamps, photos, and even clips from the HOA meeting, to a private cloud folder. I labeled it "in case of gaslighting." Because at this point, I expected it. Then I started thinking bigger. I'd seen what happened to other homeowners online, the ones who told their HOA stories and suddenly had half the internet backing them up. Maybe it was time I shared mine too. So, one Saturday morning, I set up my phone in the garden, the same garden where all this started, and hit record. The video started simple. Just me, sitting in a lawn chair, holding the camera I'd found. "Hey everyone. My name's your name, and I just found out my HOA installed a security camera on my property without permission." I kept it raw, honest, unedited. No fancy filters, no dramatic music. Just the truth. I walked the viewers through everything: how I discovered it, what the HOA said, what I found out. I ended the video with one line that came straight from my gut. They called it safety. I call it surveillance. I didn't post it right away, though. I wanted to make sure every detail was airtight. So while the video sat in my drafts, I focused on real-world action. I mailed the legal notices. I double-checked my home Wi-Fi for strange connections. I even installed small covers over my actual outdoor cameras, kind of ironic, but symbolic too. Cinematic montage moment, slow-motion shots of envelopes being sealed and dropped into the mailbox, the thunk of the mail slot echoing like a battle drum, the close-up of my hand covering a lens with black tape, me flipping through printouts of the HOA's own bylaws, highlighting lines in neon yellow. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about control. About what happens when a group of people with a little power decide they can take a little more and then a little more after that. A few days later, I got a short, chilly email from the HOA president. We've received your correspondence. The board will review and respond accordingly. Translation: we're in trouble and don't know what to do yet. Good. That same night, Tom came over holding his tablet. You're not gonna believe this, he said. He showed me a neighborhood forum thread someone else had just posted about finding a small black device behind their shed. The comments section was blowing up. People were starting to connect dots. It was spreading. That's when I knew my story wasn't just mine anymore. So, I took a deep breath, opened the TikTok app, and hit post. The upload bar crawled across the screen like it was taking its sweet time deciding the fate of the world. Then it was live. Within an hour, 2,000 views. By midnight, 30,000. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Comments poured in. This is insane. HOAs are getting out of control. Girl, I'd lawyer up too. Please tell me you covered the lens with a sticker. It was like validation from the entire internet. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was standing up. Voiceover moment, cinematic pacing, soft but powerful. They thought they could monitor me quietly. But privacy isn't a privilege, it's a boundary. And once you cross it, you wake up a storm. I leaned back in my chair, scrolling through the flood of messages, neighbors from other states, people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some even reached out offering legal advice, news tips, contacts from local journalists. I smiled. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't just reacting to their power play, I was reclaiming it. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The HOA wanted silence. But now? The whole world was watching. When I woke up the morning after posting the video, my phone looked like it was on fire. Notifications everywhere, comments, DMs, emails, even a message from a local reporter. It had officially gone viral. I scrolled through the chaos while sipping my coffee, trying to decide if I felt more nervous or powerful. Maybe both. Because deep down, I knew something had shifted, not just online, but right here in my neighborhood. By noon, the HOA sent out a community update. You could practically hear the panic between the lines. We want to assure residents that all security measures implemented by the HOA are for the safety and benefit of the community. We take privacy concerns seriously and are reviewing recent claims to ensure compliance with all regulations. Translation: we got caught, and now we're scrambling. An hour later, 2 board members showed up near the entrance of the neighborhood with clipboards, pretending to do routine inspections. But I could tell they were on damage control. Meanwhile, neighbors started picking sides. Tom was practically a local hero now, apparently he'd shared the video on 3 community Facebook pages. He came by grinning like he'd just won a neighborhood war. You did it, he said. They're cornered. But not everyone was thrilled. Mrs. Jenkins stopped waving at me when she was trimming her roses. Linda, the self-proclaimed HOA defender, posted a long rant about people spreading misinformation online and endangering our community's image. Funny thing, though, she didn't deny the camera existed. That week was chaos. Every day brought something new. Monday, the HOA sent an email saying the camera was part of a pilot safety program that had been temporarily placed for testing. Tuesday, the same camera mysteriously disappeared from my fence line overnight. No explanation, no apology, just gone. Wednesday, I caught a new no trespassing sign near the HOA office. Irony level, maximum. And Thursday? That's when the local news truck rolled in. Yeah, they actually came to interview me. The segment aired that night under the headline: Homeowner claims HOA secretly installed cameras, residents demand answers. Cinematic cut, drone shot over my street at golden hour, the camera panning slowly over driveways and rooftops as my voiceover says. They built a system to watch everyone, and forgot that people were watching them too. The HOA tried to do some PR damage control. They sent out a community statement on their website that said, "The HOA board regrets any misunderstanding. We are committed to transparency moving forward." Transparency, huh? Cute word choice for people who literally hid a camera under a bush. Neighbors started whispering at mailboxes, talking in driveways, comparing stories. One family even found what looked like another hidden lens near the playground fence. The trust that used to exist here? Gone. Completely gone. You could feel it in the air, that awkward tension every time people walked past each other. The neighborhood wasn't just a community anymore, it was a case study in surveillance and silence. But even in the middle of all that mess, I felt lighter. Because for the first time, I wasn't wondering anymore. I wasn't second-guessing myself or waiting for permission to be upset. I'd spoken up. And it mattered. One night, I was sitting outside my usual spot, string lights glowing softly over the patio, when Tom walked over with 2 cups of coffee. We sat in silence for a minute, just watching the street. He said quietly, "You know, they might take that board apart after this." I shrugged. Maybe. But if it means people think twice before crossing a line, it's worth it. Cinematic moment, the camera pans slowly over quiet houses, sprinklers running, porch lights flickering, the perfect, eerie calm after a storm. In the background, my voiceover cuts in. They said it was for safety. But you can't build safety on secrets. Because once you lose trust, you lose everything. And then there was the meeting. The next HOA meeting was practically a ghost town. The board sat behind their long table, facing a room that used to be full. This time, maybe 5 people showed up. And 3 of them were reporters. When I walked in, you could see the discomfort spread across their faces like a wave. They gave me polite nods, shuffled papers, and avoided eye contact. No speeches. No confrontation this time. Just a long, quiet acknowledgement. They knew they'd been exposed. I didn't need to say a word. My presence said enough. By the end of that week, the board announced they were re-evaluating their security policies. Some members resigned. New elections were announced. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. Voiceover, closing shot of my property at sunset, soft wind rustling the trees. I didn't set out to go viral. I just wanted my privacy back. But sometimes, standing up for what's right doesn't just change your yard, it changes the whole neighborhood. Standing in my yard at sunset, I finally felt a deep, quiet sense of relief. Not because the HOA had been embarrassed or the cameras removed, although, yes, that helped, but because I had taken my power back. My home, my space, my rules. For weeks, it felt like every rustle of leaves, every flicker of sunlight through the trees, carried a hidden eye. But now it felt like mine again. Peace returned slowly, like the sun creeping over the horizon after a long, dark night. I reflected on what had happened. Privacy isn't just a convenience. It's not a luxury. It's a boundary. A line that, once crossed, can make a person question everything they thought was safe. Standing up for that boundary isn't just about fighting one camera, one HOA, or one violation, it's about declaring, quietly and firmly, I am in control of my space. My life isn't up for silent review. I looked over at the camera I'd removed weeks ago, still sitting on the counter, harmless now, stripped of its power. I smiled, almost wistfully. It was funny how something so small could cause so much tension, yet so much growth. Voiceover, soft and cinematic. They thought they could watch me without consequence. But privacy is more than a rule, it's a right. And standing up for that right is never wasted effort. I took a slow, deliberate walk around my yard. The wind rustled the leaves, sprinklers hissing softly in the evening glow. I reached the fence line where the camera had been hidden and, for the first time in weeks, ran my fingers along it without hesitation. No fear. No second guessing. Just ownership. Cinematic cut, slow pan across my home, the garden thriving, the driveway empty, the porch lights glowing softly. I closed the blinds with one confident hand, a symbolic gesture of reclaiming my private space. My steps through the yard were measured, deliberate, and full of quiet triumph. I thought about the neighbors who had been silent, those who had whispered behind closed doors, and even the ones who had opposed me. Everyone had been forced to reckon with the fact that rules don't give anyone unlimited power over someone else's life. Integrity, accountability, and courage matter more than bylaws drafted in isolation. And then I smiled. Signature cinematic one-liner, final close-up. They installed a camera to watch me, but I'm the one everyone will remember. Or, if you want a slightly more poetic, universal punch. You can spy all you want, but truth always finds a way to the light. I let the camera linger on the yard, my hands brushing the garden beds, my feet leaving gentle imprints in the soft soil. Every shot symbolized reclamation, a victory that wasn't loud or flashy, just quiet, firm, undeniable. The sun dipped low behind the horizon, the sky streaked with amber and pink. My home stood calm and whole. And for the first time in weeks, I truly felt at peace. Because the fight wasn't just about cameras or HOAs. It was about respect, boundaries, and standing up when someone thinks they can take more than their share. And that lesson, simple, quiet, powerful, was mine.